Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week. And if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment down below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a chevron top. Made a chevron dress a while ago and wanted to bring some of those wavy vibes back to the channel. For this incarnation, we went with shorter sleeves for versatility and a variegated yarn because it makes the chevron all the more groovy. This one also happens to be beginner friendly, so if you're new to crochet, it's the perfect place to get hooking. Speaking of, if you're looking to start hooking the trendiest crochet designs, look no further. We have hundreds of classic and modern crochet patterns with new patterns on the way, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 285 grams of yarn, and that's 515 yards if you're stateside, and the individual measurements will be on the screen. As for tools, a 5 and 5.5 millimeter hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if you've ever kept a diary or a journal. I used to journal as a teenager, but I mainly just drew in them. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is for size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're going to grab our 5 millimeter hook, and we're going to get started with our prep chain for our shoulder band. Now this prep chain isn't going to be worked into our piece. We're just going to make a chain for the measurement that we need so we know how many slip stitch rows we need to be doing. So the first measurement that we're going to need to make is going to be from mid collarbone to mid collarbone, and that's going to need to be in multiples of 12. I now have the measurement of my front panel. I need a total of 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters, and I made a total chain of 36. Now we're going to need to make a chain, also in multiples of 12, that goes up and over our shoulder that reaches our back. And now I have the shoulder measurement. For my shoulder, I need a total of 24 chains, and that's 6 inches or 15 centimeters. And now from here, the back panel is going to be the same amount of chains as the front panel. So for me, another chain 36. And then the shoulder is going to be same as the shoulder that we just made, so a chain of 24. So in total, I would have 120 chains. But now that we have these measurements, go ahead and write these numbers down if you need to, but now we can get started on the actual shoulder band. So now grabbing our secondary color yarn, or the color of our shoulder band, we're going to make a chain the height that we'd like for our shoulder band to be. I'd like for mine to be about 2 inches or 5 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 10. Now that we have our chain, we're going to do our first slip stitch row. Block off that last chain, do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain. And then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert, and then yarn over, pull through both loops. Once more, into that following chain, insert your hook, and gently pull through both loops. Continue putting 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the following row might be a little too tight to work into. Now that our row 1 is finished, we're going to get started on our row 2. That's going to be back loop slip stitches. So chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. find that following stitch and insert into that back loop or the loop that's furthest away from us, and again gently pull through both loops on our hook. And continue putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. For the shoulder band, all the rows that we are going to do is going to be back loop slip stitch rows, and we're going to continue to do these rows for the same amount of total chains that we made. So for me, I will be doing a total of 120 rows, but we also want to make sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into the 12th rows. So I'll be doing the amount of rows that I need for my front panel first, just to show you what it's going to look like, and then I will meet you back. So I am back and I have just finished up my 36 rows. And I did a total of 36 rows because that's the amount of chains that I made from collarbone to collarbone. And I did insert my stitch marker into every 12th row. Now I have 3 stitch markers into place. Here's my first, my second, and my third. And as you can see, I inserted a second stitch marker into the last row that I did. That's right next to my working yarn. And that's just to indicate where the front panel is going to be. And from here, I'm going to do the same amount of rows as chains that I made when it went up and over our shoulder. And I'm going to be making sure that I'm inserting my stitch markers into the 12th rows, and also my second stitch marker into that last row as well, so I know where the shoulder portion ends. I'm going to continue on with the sequence for the back panel and the other shoulder as well. I will meet you back when we have the entirety of our shoulder band finished up so we can seam it all together. I am back and I have just finished up the amount of rows that I need for my shoulder band, which is 120 rows. And as you can see, I have inserted my stitch marker into every 12th row that we had, making my way all the way around. And I have also inserted my second stitch marker, so it's actually my purple stitch marker, into the amount of chains that we had for our front panel and our shoulders, making my way all the way around. Now, just to make sure that this fits, go ahead and just place this around our shoulders, making sure that I can stretch around our shoulders and touch each other quite comfortably. And now from here, we're going to seam everything together. So let's press these 2 corners together. So we have inserted our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel, making sure that our band isn't twisted. And then next, we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now let's do our first seam. We're going to find that first stitch into our front panel and insert only into that front loop. Find that next stitch into the back panel and insert only into that back loop. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3. Again, find that next stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, and pull through all 3. And that is that. We're going to continue with our seam until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Now that our outside loop slip stitch seam is finished, we're now going to do a single crochet row. So we're going to chain 1 and then switch out to our 5.5mm hook. Now all we're going to do is start with putting 1 single crochet into every side row. So as a quick tip, since I had a total of 120 side rows, I should have 120 single crochets. So finding my first side row, this raised one is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop. And if you're like me, you'd like to weave in your tail ends as you go, place your tail end over your hook, and then single crochet around everything. Let's do that again. In through that following side row, mine is this divot right here. I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook with another single crochet. Let's do just one more set together. My following side slip stitch row is this raised row. So I'm going to find that top loop, insert in through there, and then find my following side row, which is this divot right here. I'm going to insert my hook in through there with a single crochet. And I'm going to continue putting 1 single crochet into every side row. And a really quick tip, we do want to make sure that we're still inserting our stitch markers into the same stitch that's worked into that side row. So if some of you are like me and your stitch markers are along the bottom, once you reach that side row, when you single crochet into there, just remove that stitch marker and then insert it into that single crochet and make your way all the way around. And make sure that we're inserting our stitch markers into the same stitches, so into every 12th stitch, including the stitches that separate our panels. Now that our single crochet row with our secondary color is finished, I slip stitched into that chain space and then did a chain up of 1 and cut. Now we're going to get started on the body portion, but we're going to have to do a prep row first. So grabbing our primary color yarn, we're going to insert our hook, into one of our panel stitch marker stitches. I'm going to insert mine into the stitch that's nearest to my seam for my shoulder band because this is going to be where each of our rows connect. I'm going to insert my 5.5mm hook into there, insert my primary color yarn onto my hook, and pull through. Now from here we're all going to start with a chain 3. That is going to count as a stitch, and then we're also going to double crochet into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in. So preparing for double crochet, we're going to yarn over, insert into that same stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now from here, each of our stitch marker stitches is going to be the point, and then the middle stitch that we have is going to be the depth of our chevron detail. So from here, for all of us, since we should all have 11 stitches in between our stitch marker stitches, we're going to be doing 1 double crochet, 3 half double, 3 single, 3 half double, 1 double crochet, and then an increase of 3 into our stitch marker stitches. So let's do that together. Yarn over, inserting into that following stitch, and I'm going to weave my tail ends as I go, so I'm going to place my tail ends over my hook, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, there's my first double crochet, and then we're going to be putting 1 half double crochet into each of the 3 following stitches. So yarn over into that following stitch with our first half double, into the stitch right after that with our second half double, into the stitch right after that with our third half double, and now we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into each of the 3 following stitches. So into that next stitch, a single, into the stitch right after that, a single, and then 1 more single into that following stitch for a total of 3 single crochets. And then we're going to work our way back up. So 3 half double crochets into that following stitch. There goes my first half double. Into the stitch right after that, my second half double, and then my third half double. And then we should all be at the stitch right before our stitch marker, and into that last available stitch, 1 double crochet. So insert, pull through 2, pull through 2, and then at our stitch marker, we're going to take this out for now. We're going to do an increase of 3 double crochets. So into there is 1, into that same stitch, 2, and then into that same stitch, 3 double crochets just like that. And we're going to insert our stitch marker back into that middle double crochet that we did so we know where the highest point is. And then from here we're going to continue to repeat this all the way around. So let's just do the following set and then I'll let you guys do the rest on your own. Now like I said, it's going to be 1 double, 3 half double, 3 single, 3 half double, 1 double, and then our increase of 3 doubles. So to do that really quickly, into that following stitch, our first double, into each of my next 3 stitches, 1 half double crochet into each. There's my first, there's my second, there's my third, and then into each of the 3 following stitches, 1 single crochet into each. So there's 1, there's 2, there's 3. Next is 3 half double crochets. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and then into that last stitch right before our stitch marker stitch, a double crochet. So there is my 1 double crochet. Then lastly, into that stitch marker stitch, go ahead and take your stitch marker out. There we go. We're going to do an increase of 3 double crochets. So there is 1, there is 2, and there is 3. Now, be sure to insert your stitch marker back into that middle stitch that we did for our increase of 3, and then repeat this, making our way all the way around. So I've made my way all the way around. Right before we close off this row, we're going to be putting 1 more double crochet into that same stitch marker stitch that our chain 3 is out of because we made our way all the way around. So we're going to yarn over, insert into that stitch with a double crochet, And then to close off our row, we're going to slip stitch into that third chain that we made. So counting up 1, 2, 3, insert your hook in through that third chain with a slip stitch, and don't forget to insert your stitch markers into that middle stitch. So this is mine right here. I'm going to reinsert both of my stitch markers. Now let's get started on our first body row. Let's all start with a chain 3 and flip our work. Now that our work is flipped, we're going to start by putting 1 double crochet into that same stitch that our chain is in. So right where those stitch markers are, I'm going to insert with a double crochet. This first double crochet is going to count as our increase when it comes to doing our increase of 3s whenever we reach our stitch marker. And now from here, we're going to be putting 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. So there is 1, there is 2, here is 3, here is 4, and then 5. Now that our 5 double crochets are finished, we're ready to do a double crochet 3 together. So yarn over, insert your hook into that following stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops. Yarn over, insert your hook into that following stitch, pull through the first 2 loops again, and then once more, yarn over into that following stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through just the first 2 loops. Now altogether we should have 4 loops on our hook, so yarn over and pull through all 4. Now that is our double crochet 3 together. From here we're going to put 1 double crochet into each of the following stitches until we reach our stitch marker, so that should be another 5 double crochets. And then into that following stitch, which should be our stitch marker stitch, an increase of 3 double crochets. So there's my first, into that same stitch with my second, and into that same stitch with my third. And don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that middle stitch that we made so we know where the point is. Now we're going to continue to do this, making our way all the way around. So 5 double crochets, double crochet 3 together, 5 double crochets, and then increase of 3 double crochets. Continue this, making our way all the way around. I've just made my way all the way around with my first row when it came to our body, because remember that single crochet row, and then that other row that had the double half double singles. Those both count as our prep rows. So now that I've made my way all the way around, we're going to double crochet into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in, and then we're going to slip stitch into that third chain to close off this row. So count up 1, 2, 3, into that third chain, insert with a slip stitch, and to get started on our row 2, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now we're going to be increasing into every other row, so every even number row, because this does need to make its way around our shoulders. So how we're going to increase, getting started on a row 2, we're going to insert 2 double crochets now into the same stitch our chain 3 is in. So go ahead and insert in through there with 1 double, and then in through that same with a second double crochet. And now from here, we're going to be putting 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches. Now that we have our 5 double crochets, we're going to be doing another double crochet 3 together. So as a refresher, yarn over into that following stitch, pull through the first 2, yarn over into that following stitch, pull through the first 2 again, and then once more into that following stitch, pull through the first 2, then yarn over, pull through the last 4 loops on our hook. And then from here, put 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches, and the stitch right after that should be our stitch marker stitch. And now we're going to do an increase of 5 double crochets into that following stitch, which is our stitch marker stitch. So inserting into that following stitch, 5 double crochets. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we need to insert our stitch marker into that third stitch that we made, into that increase of 5, or that middle stitch, just like that. And then again, 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches, so 5 double crochets in total. And then double crochet 3 together. And now that we have that, 1 double crochet into each of the next 5 stitches, and then an increase of 5 double crochets. So into that following stitch, which is our stitch marker stitch, 5 double crochets into that 1 stitch. And now that we have our 5 double crochets, don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that middle stitch or the 3rd double crochet that we made. And continue this sequence, making our way all the way around. And when we don't have any more stitches left, I will meet you back. We've made our way all the way around, and now to close off our row 2, into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in, we're going to do an additional 2 double crochets, because remember, for this even number row, we did an increase of 5 into each of the stitch marker stitches. So into that same stitch, there's my first double, and then into that same stitch once more, there's my second double crochet, and now we're going to slip stitch it into that 3rd chain. So 1, 2, 3, into that 3rd chain with a slip stitch, and I'm going to be inserting my stitch markers just into that stitch as well. Now getting started on our row 3, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. Now every odd number row will be a row that will extend the amount of stitches from our previous even number row. So for this row, we're going to maintain an increase of 3 into each of our stitch marker stitches, and then double crochet 3 together into the middle of our sets. So that means that we aren't doing any additional increases or decreases. So let's get started on this row together. We're going to start by putting 1 double crochet into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in. And then we're going to be putting 1 double crochet into each of the next few stitches for the same amount of double crochets that we made for our row 1, plus an additional 1. So as an example, for row 1, right after we did our increase, we had 5 double crochets. So for our row 3, we're now going to do 6 double crochets. And then as an example, once we reach our row 5, we're going to do 7 double crochets and then our double crochet 3 together. So let's just do this one together. So now that I have the same amount of double crochets as our previous odd number row, plus an additional 1, so for row 3 we should all have 6 double crochets, we're now going to do our double crochet 3 together. After our double crochet 3 together, we're going to be putting 1 double crochet into the next stitches until we reach our stitch marker, which should be the same amount of stitches that we started this set off with. So 6 here should be 6 available stitches over here, right before our stitch marker. And like I said, since this is an odd number row, into that stitch marker stitch, we're going to do an increase of 3 double crochets. And don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that second stitch or that middle stitch. Continue this, making our way all the way around, and then I'll meet you back. We've made our way around, and our rows 1, 2, and 3 are nearly finished. Let's close off our row 3. To close off every odd number row, we're going to put 1 double crochet into the same stitch that our chain 3 is in, slip stitch into that 3rd chain that we made when we started this row, and then don't forget to insert your stitch markers into the top of that stitch. And now to get started on our following row, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. So getting started on a row 4 or any even number row for this portion, we're going to be putting 2 double crochets into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in, so into those stitch markers that we just inserted. There's my first double crochet, and then into that same stitch, another double crochet, and then from here, 1 double crochet into each of the next following stitches for the same amount of double crochets that we made for the previous row. So for everyone, since we're all working on row 4, we're going to be putting 1 double crochet into each of the following 6 stitches because we did 6 stitches for our previous row. Now that we have our 6 double crochets, our double crochet 3 together, and then 1 double crochet into each of the following stitches until we reach our stitch marker, which should be 6 double crochets again. And then into our stitch marker stitch, an increase of 5 double crochets, because every even number row is going to be our increase row. And when we have our increase of 5, don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that middle stitch or the 3rd double crochet that we made. Now continue with this stitch sequence until the end of the row. And into the same stitch our chain 3 is in, do 2 double crochets to have a complete increase of 5 for that first stitch that we did. And from here it's going to be a repeat of our 2 previous rows. So as a refresher, for every odd number row that we have, that isn't going to have any additional increases or decreases. So we're going to have an increase of 3 at our stitch marker stitches, and then a double crochet 3 together in the middle of our sets, and then the amount of double crochets that we should have should be the same amount of stitches as our previous odd number row, plus an additional 1. So like I said in one of our previous clips, since our row 3 had 6 double crochets, our row 5 will have 7 double crochets, row 7 will have 8 double crochets, and so on and so forth. Now for every even number row, that is going to be our increase row, so pretty much the same way that we just did this one. At our stitch marker stitches, we're going to have an increase of 5 double crochets while maintaining our double crochet 3 together in the middle of our sets. And the amount of double crochets that we should have for that row in between our double crochet 3 together and our increase should be the same amount of double crochets as our previous odd number row. We're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until this portion can fall over our shoulders, and that's going to be as wide as this piece can get. So I'll meet you back when we have our shoulder portion finished up so we can get started on the body right after that. And I will meet you back right after an odd number row. I am back and I have the shoulder portion of my top all finished. Now I have a total of 5 rows, remembering that we are not counting that first single crochet row and then that following prep row that we did. And I have a total of 4 inches or 10 centimeters, and that's from our first row to the lowest point that we have, or my total length is 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat our previous row, so our non-increase row, until the panel stitch markers that we have can reach underneath our underarm, forming our body and our armholes on both sides. So let's just get this first set started, and I'll let you guys do the rest on your own. So right after we have slip stitch into that 3rd chain, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. Since this is a repeat of our previous row, which is a non-increase row, we're going to start with putting 1 double crochet into that same stitch that our chain 3 is in. From here, we're going to be putting 1 double crochet for the same amount of double crochets as our previous row, since this isn't an increase row. So for those of you that have my numbers that stopped at row 5, I had a total of 7 double crochets from my previous row. So right here, I will be putting 1 double crochet into each of the 7 stitches. Now that my double crochet is finished, we're going to do our double crochet 3 together. And then from here, put 1 double crochet into each of the following stitches until we reach our following stitch marker, which should be the same amount of double crochets that we just did. So for me, 7. Now that my stitch marker is reached, this isn't an increase row, so just an increase of 3 double crochets. And don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that 2nd stitch or the middle one, and then continue to repeat this to the end of the row. Then continue to repeat this row until this is long enough to start to form our armholes, and then I will meet you back to get started on the length of our body. I am back and the length of my shoulder portion is all finished, and this is the shoulder portion slash the portion that can reach underneath our underarm, forming our armholes and our body. I now have a total of 7 rows, again not counting those first 2 prep rows, and my length down to my lowest point is 5 inches or 13 centimeters, and now my total length is 7 inches or 18 centimeters. Now from here we're going to combine our panel stitch markers to form each of our panels. So right after we have slip stitched into that 3rd chain, we're going to align our panel stitch markers front and back, making sure that we have the same amount of decrease and increases between our stitch markers, because we want the front panel to be aligned with the back panel and then the armholes aligned with the armholes. But right after we have slip stitched into that 3rd chain, for this first one, we are also going to be inserting our hook into that panel stitch marker stitch as well, and just yarn over, pull through everything. Now that has formed our armhole, and then our body is worked along the inside. From here, we're going to chain 3 and flip our work. So working the length of our body, we are not going to be doing any increases. This is going to start off the same way that we have started off all of our other rows. So insert your hook into that stitch that our chain 3 is in with a double crochet, and then we're going to continue on with our sets. So for me, since the last amount of double crochets that I did was 7, I will be doing 7 double crochets, my double crochet 3 together, 7 double crochets again for me, and then increase of 3 at our stitch marker. Continue this until we reach our following panel stitch marker, and then I'll meet you back to show you how we're going to combine this side. We have made our way down with our double crochets, reaching our panel stitch marker. From here, we're going to do a double crochet, just combining the front panel and the back panel. So yarn over, insert your hook in through that following stitch, which should be our panel stitch marker stitch, and then also insert your hook into that following stitch within the back panel, which should also be our panel stitch marker stitch. And from here, we're going to yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops on our hook, which are the first 2 loops that we just inserted our hook into, and then yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, and now we're going to continue on with our sequence going down the other side. So let's flip our work. And now that we have just combined both our front and our back panel, also forming our armhole, into that same stitch that we have inserted our hook into just now, we're going to do an additional 2 double crochets, and that is going to count as our increase of 3 double crochets. So here's our first double crochet for our increase, into that same stitch, so into the stitch that our stitch marker is still into. Here's my second, and then here is my third. Now don't forget to insert your stitch marker into that second stitch that we made, or the middle stitch, and then from here we can continue on with the regular sets, making our way all the way down. So this will pretty much be the remainder of our piece to get the length that we'd like, so cropped, long, or a dress. Continue this row with no additional increases or decreases for the desired length that you want, and I will meet you back right after we do a chain of a 1 and cut. I am back and I've just finished up the length of my piece. Now I have a total of 17.5 inches or 45 centimeters, or a total length of 19.5 inches or 50 centimeters, and we are actually all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye.